So brand and marketing, for those of you in the room like Jen, you know, because you get approached by people who understand brand to be logo or visual identity. But what we know is that brand is essence. Brand is your essence. And marketing, or public relations or communications, is how you communicate that essence. And that includes a variety of different channels. So the two things are separate in function, but actually, in best practice and in for the best application, they're synonymous. The two are synonymous. They're best with each other and in the company of each other. So what does that really mean? It means that when you look at the world right now, the call around culture and consumerism and humanity is actually about cohesiveness and transparency. Everything around us in the world is calling us to consider these things as being synonymous. So Judy, we're going to kick it off with our first
we've got 5 things you need to know about brand and marketing. But to Dev's point, for today, we're going to call them one thing. We're saying brand and marketing is the same thing. You can't market without a brand, and you can't have a brand without letting people know that you exist so that they engage in with you. So we got 5 tips. And the first one is build a brand Bible. We call it a Bible. You've heard it called a brand narrative before, a brand document. What we're saying is, just like with your elevator pitches yesterday, you have to have a document. You have to have something that captures the what you do, why you do it, and how you do it in a really, really clear manner. So marketing says you can repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. So we call it a brand Bible. I've started all of my companies with this. Every organization I work with, we make sure that they've got something that captures what it is they do, how they do it, and why they do it. Your purpose, your values, and how you're going to engage your clients to create business. And you really have to think about this document as being, doesn't have to be a big, heavy, weighty document, and it can be articulated through a video, however you choose to do it. But what it does have to do is it has to state those things clearly. It can be 1 page, or in the case of Nike, it's 200 pages. 200 pages, because they're so clear about their brand and how they're going to do what it is they do and why they do it. When I work with something, when we started Blo, we made sure that was really, really, that was where we started with the business. We started with that then to get to the model. And somebody asked us a really good question. They said, there's 39 Blos now. How do you ensure that continues to happen, that message continues to happen? Because when you've got a really, really good brand document, you actually use it as part of your training manual, as part of your ops manual, as part of your client service manual. So for us, step number 1 is of branding and marketing. And in fact, I would say step number 1 in building a business is build a brand Bible, remembering that you don't keep, us entrepreneurs, we tend to keep recreating our message. How many of us do that, recreate our message? Come on. I even heard it in the elevator pitches, right? Little tweaks. Tweaks are good, but you should be distilling it, not adding new messages. Because you know your story, you've heard it 1,000 times, but your customers, and in fact your team, have already forgotten it. So number 1 is build a brand Bible. Thank you.
So then what do you do with that brand Bible? Once you've articulated your DNA, how does it hold weight? How does it mean anything? And that's where step 2, brand congruency. Ensure your brand congruency. That's where this comes in. Because really, you can articulate yourself till the cows come home, but if you aren't being congruent, and if you aren't being consistent, and if you aren't thinking about what we call touch points, the variety of places that either your team or your consumers come into contact with your brand, if you're not thinking about them, you can't really be congruent. So you want to think about that experience in all corners of what it is that you do. So brand congruency, it's all about promise. And one of the things that Judy and I talk about is that when it comes to measuring your congruency, what you need to ask yourself is, what I'm saying will happen, is that what people are experiencing? What you tell me I will experience, Is it what I will experience? Deliver on your promise. That's step one when it comes to brand congruency. And there's some really good examples on this. You guys met Zach and Ryan from the Juice Truck yesterday. So I've been mentoring them for 3 years, since the inception of their business. And well, they're all about juice. What they're really about is wellness, community, sustainability, the environment. So a couple of years ago, every once in a while, I like to check in and talk about dreams and just check in, on the vision and what we're working towards and what the boys, what Zach and Ryan feel are really important. And Rye, the shorter one yesterday, he's like, well, I've always wanted a fast car. So when we do well, it'd be pretty awesome if I could buy, I don't know, like a Porsche or something. So can you imagine how bizarre it would be to see like Ryan driving down the street in a Hummer?
Yeah.
How bizarre. And the thing that's interesting about brand congruency is that sometimes we're not even aware, but we have a boiling point. We're not aware on an integral level, but on the surface, we can see that something just isn't right. And that's why it would shake you as a consumer, because you're like, well, I know that this is what inherently the Juice Truck stands for, because everything about their social media, their articulation of their brand tells me they care about community and the environment and sustainability. And then I see the Juice Truck branded Hummer and I just don't get it. And this happens a lot with corporations and brands and companies, is they're not thinking that in fact everything is a touch point. Your email signature is a touch point. Every place where your team or your consumer can interact with you is a touch point. And it's an opportunity to be congruent in your brand.
Can I give you a couple of examples of that?
Yeah, well, I'm going to talk a little bit about Blo,
Okay.
and then I want to hear those. So in the case of Blo, what was really integral to its success, yeah, we articulated this super badass brand, and that got us a lot of recognition, but what nailed it home, what drilled it in, was its congruency. So we had this awesome visual articulation, we're up and running now, but really how it sank, why it held weight with people in our community when we were just a first timer, nobody had ever heard of Blow Dry Bars, what the hell are they, 600 square foot location, was because of our brand congruency. It was our philosophy, it was our language, it was the experience when you walked through the door, the music that was played. We knew everything was a touch point, so they were considered. They were all a part of the experience. Floor managers, instead of being called floor managers or receptionists, they're called blow bosses. Stylists are called blowers. Vocabulary is such an integral part and such an awesome opportunity for you to have an opportunity right away to engage brand congruency and experience, because you have a language, right? A shared language. One of the ones that I really love is if we had something go wrong, and in the case of Blow Dry Bars, or in that kind of environment, it's usually an unhappy client. Well, we called them a split end. It totally changes the experience. And it means like, hey, we've got a situation, we've got a split end, da-da-da. It means that you can actually talk about it when clients or consumers are around, because it's your language. It's not the same, it doesn't hold the same fear and implications as saying in front of clients, well, we've got an unhappy client at the end of the bar. Because people start to wear that when you're like, we've got a split end, Devon, would you take over? Totally different experience. So all of these are opportunities to be congruent in your brand.
Yeah. No, that's great, Dev. Thanks. So I think that when Dev's talking, when we're thinking about brand congruency, it's really the integrity of your brand. And what's interesting when you have founders is you kind of got this double-edged sword. Your company sits here when you're a company of size, but when you're a founder and you've related yourself to being that brand, which often founders do nowadays, you'll see founders as being really, really part of the brand story, there also has to be integrity and brand congruency in your life. So that's kind of an interesting, so let's think about you guys for a second. So when we're talking about brand congruency, I thought Devon's like Juice Truck juice truck story is like amazing, because it's not like those guys are bad guys. Like clearly they're like sweethearts, and so sweet. But is that, you know, you look at them, and as they started a company, Ryan's now realizing how I move in my life, how I move through my life is actually going to affect my brand, and vice versa, if I'm going to put the juice truck out there as two boys that started a company together. So yeah, I might have this idea that I want a car or a big truck like this, but is it congruent with what I say I am? You know, I was listening to Jen's little elevator pitch, and when she talked about, you know, we really like to work with social enterprises, that's like our sweet spot, is how am I going to feel about you, Lou? Like if I buy into that and I meet Jen and she is actually, you know, the antithesis of that, she is all those wonderful things, but then I talk to her and she's like, oh yeah, we just picked up a cigarette client. What do you think happens? Because I like her, I'm not actually going to have I'm not going to understand what's happening within me that all of a sudden makes me start to not trust her brand. You know, and it, like Devon said, these brand congruencies, these touch points that we make sure that we have to have around our brand. Blo is an excellent example, like Dev said. It is an interesting name, huh? So we had a visual art, Blo, B-L-O, no W, and I know that sounds weird, but I was one of the founders, and I was 40 whatever at the time. Like, it's just not cool for me personally. Like, I had to be careful about the level of cheekiness where it verged for me for rudeness. We were also highly cognizant of you can have fun with a name, so not adding a W was really important to me. It looked cooler brand-wise, but then when you walked into Blo, we made sure it was clean. It was white and pink. So you took this word that was a bit provocative and a bit cheeky, and then we made sure that the space was the opposite, that it was a bit fresh and a bit girly, so take away from that kind of, that connotation around that word. And then all these touch points were caring and sweet, you know, all these things. So like, you know, Devon said, our sign-offs, you don't have a blow dry bar and have in your brand Bible that you're, you know, that you're cheeky and that you're all these things, and then you don't say thank you at the end of your email. You say, you know, the higher the hair, the closer to God. You start to say, we're about hair, we're about your experience. And I said to Dev, we were talking about this earlier, as I worked with a kids company, well, we both did at one point. We worked with a kids brand that at the end, this is a kids brand for under the age of 5, at the end of the founder's email, he used to put regards. So how does that make you feel? We take care of your kid, regards. Like right away, it's not that it's wrong, but right away you're like, oh, okay, no, this is a business for you, it's tractional for you. So that brand congruency is really important. I said we've got a great, you know, we've got some family businesses here. So you know what that's like. You know, we talked a bit about family. Liz, we know a bit about your family. I mean, Liz's dad and mom and her whole family is, you go to Taku and you have this, it's on my phone, it's like one of my best experiences ever. You have this experience, but when you meet any members of the family, it's a congruent experience. You're not getting this thing of we're West Coast family, and by the way, we're all, you know, we're sort of standoffish, and it's all warm and food and love. So now I know it's congruent. So does that make sense, the congruency? So when we say about congruency, and just looking at our time here, because we'll move around, is, or sorry, when we're talking, so yeah, so when we're talking about congruency, we're saying?
Yes, it's all about promise. It's all about promise. So in all corners of your business, when you're thinking about being congruent and being congruent with your brand, just ask yourself a very simple question. In all corners of my business, in every touch point, am I delivering on my brand promise? And we have a little equation you'll see on your little cheat sheet, is clarity and culture and consistency equals magic. And this is a really, really good equation for you to think about when you're referring to your own brand congruency and when you're making sure that it exists in all the corners and touch points. Because truly, each of those is something for you to look at. Am I being clear? Am I being consistent? And is my culture an articulate, accurate articulation of my brand? So all great questions to ask yourself.
Great.
Jude, do you want to talk about knowing your market?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's where we've got to. You've built a brand book, a brand Bible. You know what it is you do, how it is, why it is. You know those things. You've got clear messaging around it. You've made sure that the messaging is congruent on all touch points, in all interactions with your clients your internal brand experience as well as your external brand experience. And now you need more business. That's what marketing is. It's like, I need to let people now know that I've got all this on lockdown. So when we talk about knowing your market and keeping them engaged, that is in essence the marketing part of it. The part of, I'm going to get more clients. I'm going to get people to not only engage my brand, I'm going to actually get them to exchange value for value. They're going to give me money. I'm going to get them something else. And we're not going to talk necessarily in depth right now about all the channels of marketing, because we've got all these incredible channels now. We've got social media, and you're going to talk to Hootsuite. I think it's this afternoon, so you'll hear a little bit about that. And in social media, we've got LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. We've got all of these measures, all of these channels. And then we've got, very, very traditional things, advertising in some form. Now, advertising has also taken on a little bit of a newer form in something like Facebook ads. And there's even newer forms after that. There's I would call PR a marketing channel now. I would definitely call PR a marketing channel. I've had 2 businesses that I've either founded or been involved in where we didn't do any advertising. Blo was one of them. First month we opened, we got 200 franchise requests from a single store in Vancouver with no advertising. Nurse Next Door, company I've been very, very involved in, no, not a lot. There's some advertising, but it's Canada's biggest home healthcare brand. Not a lot of advertising. So we used on both of those companies, PR was foundational to the marketing efforts. If you said what was your biggest marketing tool, we would say PR in both those companies. So that's a marketing channel. But what we do know about marketing, what we do know about knowing our customer, engaging them in is are we using the right channel? Is it congruent to what we said the value where we're going to give them? And with any marketing, you've heard this old thing is you got to try 10 things and one will stick. I would say, Devon and I will always think about this in this way though. You've got to try 10 things that have a clear message to your brand. And you've got to plan for them. You've got to test it, execute it, and then you've got to measure it. If you don't have a measurement part of it, when you're actually doing marketing, not just brand building's like, I just want you to hear my name. I actually don't care if you engage in me. I just want you to hear it enough. Marketing says, now I want you, let's do some exchange now. You give me money, I'm going to give you something. And so you've got to test that. Because a lot of people say, well, I do this as a marketing effort. I use Instagram. Well, it might be a brand building effort, but there's a point in time you've got to go, is the amount of time that I invest in this marketing channel actually having a return for me or my business? So that's the part of, I'm going to measure it. So you measure it, and if it works, what do? You do more of it. You do as much as you can. You do it over and over. And if it doesn't work, you move quickly on. But because you've already made sure it's clear to your messaging, it's congruent to your messaging, you're not going to harm your brand. It's just going to be something that didn't work. So I give the example of, and I also helped build a brand called Bombay Brow Bar, which is a local brand, and we felt like in this bar model, it's just a bunch of our wax bars, they're all Blo, just a different thing, which is great, love that, is we used to do postcards in the neighborhood as soon as we opened. And so it's one thing to do postcards. First of all, do they fit your brand? Do they look like your brand? Do they say what your brand does? But then how do you measure if they're working? Well, how would you measure something like a postcard? How would you see if something that I'm putting on a car brings people into my business?
Like a 10% discount.
Totally. A promo code. Bring it in, you get 10% off. Bring it in, let's say you can't give 10% off, or that's not what you want to do. By the way, it actually doesn't make that much difference on your business because only 10% of them will use it, but it does mean you've got 10% new clients and you maybe did some brand building. But you can say we're going to be put in for a contest, so you've got to measure it. Harder with, Devon is better with the Instagram, she can talk to that, but you've always got to measure. So what we know is that with Know Your Market is, you plan, you test, you try, you measure. If it works, you do it again. If it doesn't, you try something new. You make sure, we entrepreneurs have a million ideas, but we've got to make sure is, does it fit what we say we're going to do? And then we're saying, does it communicate your brand? Did you weigh it? Did you use your brand Bible, your brand narrative to inform the language around that and the look of it? And then the other thing is, make sure you're ahead of the pack, not always following. And if you are following, At Nurse Next Door, they call it research and rip-off. Might be a little bit. But I would say, and I've always challenged within that brand as well as in any brands I work, is if you're going to borrow something, you're allowed to, but please make it your own. Please make sure that it speaks to your brand, it uses your brand language. So if you like an idea, great, but then please make it your own. Don't confuse me as a consumer. Make it your own.
Yeah, so like what is your brand or artistic interpretation of that? That's the thing you need to ask yourself. And so when you're considering engaging, know your market and engaging your market, what I hope you heard when Judy was talking is there is such an abundance of channels. There's such an abundance of marketing and communications and public relations channels. And just because they're there doesn't mean that all of them are right for you. How many of you guys have had experiences where you like log on to Twitter, create an account, and then never use it? Or Instagram, or Tumblr, or whatever, LinkedIn. I mean, the list goes on, and every day there are more applications and more channels that we feel like because they're new, we gotta jump on the bandwagon. But what we'd like you to do is actually stop, reflect, weigh it against your brand book. Look at your audience and say, is this the right channel for me based on this articulation?
Or am I exhausting them?
Yeah, or am I absolutely exhausting my consumer? You know, the other thing to think about is that there are times when it comes to engaging your audience. For example, the juice truck is also an excellent example of this. I don't know how many of you have seen their online presence, but they do a beautiful job on Instagram. They create really beautiful, unique content. They have an awesome in-house person who creates fruit art, and they get tons of reshares. So there's reposts. There's so many different things that you can do that are on brand to leverage those channels. But what that channel speaks to, who that channel speaks to, is not their bread and butter consumer. It is definitely a community that makes them the coolest juice company in Canada, for sure. Check, it does that. But are those the people who are spending $3,000 a month on a cleanse program? The hipsters who are 25 years old hanging out online? Probably not. So it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do that, but that you need to be aware of and measure who you're speaking to, how, why, and when. So measure your channels. One last thing is, how many of you guys have heard about Oculus Rift? Okay, so Oculus Rift is a relevant story, and it is a virtual reality glasses product. It was crowdfunded online, so it was kickstarted by consumers online, which Terry McBride will talk to you a lot about the crowdfunding platform later. So what that means is a group of people that they didn't know, granted them, donated to their cause, their product, because they believed in it and helped lift them up and get them off the ground, help them get to launch. Then they IPO'd a little while later and got bought by Facebook for billions of dollars. Awesome. Where they lost a huge opportunity was in including the consumers, the people, their people that they had engaged in their story, in their experience, and in their success. So what happened was this huge scandal and outcry because all these people who had granted them, who had been a part of getting them off the ground, were like, well, you guys just made billions of dollars and you didn't come back to the people who helped get you off the ground to do anything for us? So now there's this huge backlash when really it could have been an incredible marketing opportunity. And it doesn't mean that you have to go, well, here's your 10,000 and here's your 10,000, but it does mean, how can you include these people in your story, in a story that they were part of from inception? So really, really something to think about, especially when you start utilizing crowdfunding sources, which is really another marketing channel. That's really what it is. And you want to think about every time you use these things, how you're including your audience. After you've engaged them, how can you continue to include them?
Yeah, no, that's great, Dev. It's sort of like, what are you asking of them? Are you using? And you know, when I think about that too, Dev, I think about yesterday when Evelyn talked about, from Blasted Church, talked about her marketing, which, come on, that's pretty awesome marketing. And she did what she called a contrarian philosophy. And I got to tell you, Blo was a little bit that. It said, we're in this market of hair. No one's heard about doing hair this kind of way, but who are we having to educate? We're having to educate a consumer and what they're used to as a salon. So everything we did was contrary to what a salon would do. A salon goes, if I put it in more square feet, it's more luxurious, people are gonna think more. We said, no, it's community, we're gonna make it in 600 square feet. A salon says, I'm going to create a relationship between my stylist and my client. We said, no, it's gotta be, the business model is actually the opposite, so it's gotta be a relationship with the brand. I've got to know I can get the same hair, relatively the same hair with anybody I go to. So it was quite contrarian as well. That doesn't always work. When I had proactive resolutions, when we worked with violence in the workplace, respectful workplace, we could be different, but not necessarily contrarian, because that's a bit dangerous when you're talking about things like violence in the workplace. So we could be different. So think about, are you going to be contrary? Are you going to kind of be a bit cheeky and nudge up against someone and be scratchy? Or are you just going to simply state what you do differently? So make sure that you're not, so the end result of this is, no, do it differently, don't be vanilla. And then I would say, but make sure it's appropriate for your value prop and what it is you do too.
Yeah. And just finally, why I put this hysterical picture of the Minions, who I love Minions, is because I really, really, really want to encourage you guys to think about your market that way, to think about like this community of people who really have many of the same things, many of the same commonalities. Somebody who really understands her market is Lady Gaga and her monsters. The way that she continues to speak to the people who love and adore her and who support her is so unique, and it is so integral. She is totally brand congruent. So absolutely, know your market. Don't be vanilla. So 4, create experience, not transaction. I threw up a picture of Pan Am here. You'll see it in a second. How many of you guys had watched that show, Pan Am, or seen any photography? So why I threw that up here is because what empowers experience, ironically, is process. And so it's sort of an oxymoron, transaction and experience, because without thinking about the magic and thinking about essence and congruency, your process can be overly transactional. But if you don't have process, you can't create that wow experience, because what process does is it enables people to have those incredible emotive moments with consumers and with the people they interact with, because process supports them. They don't have to think about the hats they're going to put on their head, or the uniforms that they're going to wear, or what they're supposed to say when somebody walks up to the till or the register. Because when you put those processes in place, it actually enables and empowers your team, your people, to create experience every time. And if there is no process, experience, that magic, that wow thing that you just can't put your finger on, but you freaking love going there, you can't have it. It's not scalable, because you can't have it with every employee, in every location, in every place, in every country, all over the world. So process, so crucial. I want to talk about actually an organization called WAVA, Women Against Violence Against Women, which is a cause very close to my heart. It's a rape crisis center of which I've been on the board of for a few years. Now, I talk about this because WAVA is an organization that inherently has to be process and transaction driven. Not transaction in the negative sense of the word, but in the sense of safety and privacy, confidentiality. There's so much process in what is required of taking a woman to the hospital to go through her rape kit, or servicing her on location, that how could you actually make a rape crisis center cool? I mean, really, that's a tough job. It's a tough job because we deal with very, very, very difficult content every day. And inherently, we're about confidentiality and privacy. So how can you actually create a wow experience? How can you insert some magic? Well, this is what I've been really trying to support them in the last couple of years. And now we're at a stage where we're going through brand rejuvenation. And really what I've helped them get to is to answer a question. So the whole brand process is being filtered through, does it connect women with us before they need us? So every marketing campaign, every brand articulation, our visual identity, how we go and communicate with the Vancouver community. Because if their service is about rape crisis, traditionally you're a problem solver. You're reactionary. There's a problem, they come to you. But what if women had a relationship with an organization like WAVA, if they could freaking remember the name in the first place, because it's such a long acronym? What if they had that relationship already? What if that organization, well, obviously it stands for care. Obviously it stands for empowerment. So how can we articulate that organization to actually have a brand? Well, it does inherently. There's an essence there. So really, their entire brand rejuvenation is now going to be filtered through this question of, does it build relationships with women before they need us? So it's just interesting there, right? Because inherently, like, they're so process driven, and you can, if you're overly processed or overly transactional, lose the experience of wow. And so on a very surface level, things that WAVA, an organization like WAVA, can do is obviously rebrand their name. But the second one is something so easy. What colors are on the walls? Are we going to play music? What kind of music? What kind of mood do we want when women walk in this room? What do we want them to experience the moment they walk through the door? To take weight off their shoulders, to make them feel like this is maybe a home for a moment in time. And so those are the experiential things they're trying to answer. Do you have anything you want to add?
I mean, I love that example. I know it's sort of quite a raw example, but I love it because we think about purpose, really, really obviously purpose-driven social cause organizations, and we don't want to spend time with our brand because we think it's trite. We think it's just about the service we provide, but we all need to feel connected and emotional about things we interface with, and that's what the brand is. It's the essence of. So I actually think that that's a great example of interface. You know, Lululemon's a great example of somebody that's had brand congruency and wow customer service. And then I'll bring on a situation that was a little bit, that gave them some problems. But in terms of the store, so let's not think about the founder, let's not think about that for a second, but in terms of the store experience, I mean, you get it, right? You get what it's like, you get that, you even get to take away a bag that you know it's worth something because they want to take care of the environment. Then we had, so wow customer service, yes. So I'm 50, I'm gonna be a granny. I go to their front desk and I'm like, oh my God, could you be, like I always think they're all dewy. I'm like, could you be any healthier and dewier? So you're getting that experience, everything, you're getting that wow customer service. You go, it's set out, you understand the congruency. Then we have a little thing with the founder who's a nice guy, who perhaps made some comments that were incongruent, so we reacted. Instead of just going, you made a dumb comment, we go, darn it, you asked us to sign up to support you, and now that's incongruent, and I don't know what I do with that. And you write bags that say, hey, listen, material things are important, and then you build that house, and that's fine, but I just didn't need to know about it. So we're struggling, and this is a nice guy who doesn't, he's a nice guy, we know he is, but it's incongruent. And so then all of a sudden we take these wow customer experience moments, and because we haven't been clear about our messaging all the way through, and when we're a founder, it's also us, not just the company, we get this incongruency, it actually starts to take that wow customer experience, and you're like, holy man. So wow customer experience is about, at every touch point, do I understand the message? Is it clear? And have you allowed your team, do you give them enough clear messaging and process that you empower them to be able to give that experience? So, wow customer experience, what's it about?
The question is, do you have your customer's heart? That's the only question you need to ask yourself, is in every touch point, in those experiences where there is somebody on the front line interacting with the consumer, Do we have our customer's heart? And what can we do to serve that?
Yeah, that's really the whole thing about.
So Jude, the fifth.
Yeah, do you have your customer's heart? And so can you just change to our last slide there? Thanks. So we said we need a fifth. That's what we were told. You need 5. But Devon and I looked at them and we were like, you know what? Here's what we believe. And it's funny, we're talking about brand and marketing, but I will tell you, each of these philosophies to me actually is embedded in not only your human resources, it's also embedded in your finance. You can look at your finances through the lens of, have we done a good job on understanding our brand through our finances? Is the culture engaged in what we're talking about? Did we measure? Did we test? So all of these things can actually, they're part of your whole company, not just the outward facing brand part. And really, if you do these and use these principles through every part of your business, you don't need a fifth, because here's what's going to be happening. You've got a clear brand message, you've got a brand Bible, you've got a narrative. You've incorporated that in everything from how you hire, to the decisions you make around partnering, to your contracts. If you're a company of care, do your contracts look caring, or do they look transactional? If you're an organization where you're helping people through difficult times in their life, do you answer with a hello, or do you answer with a how can I help you? You look at each element of that. So you've used your brand Bible, you've got it to inform your marketing, your operations, your business decisions. It informs your business decisions. You're ensuring that each touch point with your customer just it embodies that message. Each touch point with your customer and each touch point with your team. Each touch point with your team embodies the same. And so when it does that, your team's now able to live your brand story, because they can't live it if their touch points behind the scene don't always have that brand congruency. So you got your brand Bible, it's congruent, you're using it to inform your business decisions. Every touch point with your team and with your client tells your brand story. And it also has allowed them to have wow experiences, not only with their customers, but with each other. So you're doing all those things. And so now, you know what now? Now you have a brand. And the thing about a brand, when it's successful, is people know you and they trust you.
A brand is built on trust.
So there we go, you guys. So thank you. Do you have any questions?
That was so good.
So questions, come on. Yeah, I'm also going to sit down, different reasons, but yeah, go ahead. Carla.
So, I like the language around a brand Bible.
Yes.
And although I understand the big picture of it,
Yeah.
would you
Break it down a little bit?
have a couple
Yeah,
things
yeah.
Like they have to have these things, they have to have values, they have to have
Okay, great. I don't think there's, Devon's point is, and I'll let her speak to it a second, there's no have-tos necessarily, and people will use different language for the things that I'll talk about, and Devon might talk about them a slightly different way. But you have to understand what your purpose is. Why do you exist? I will use the example of Nurse Next Door. When I first started working with Nurse Next Door, they had done an incredible job of their values. Like, they had their values on lockdown. They had their purpose on lockdown. Their purpose is making lives better. So you're going to say, but where's the why we take care of seniors? Well, you don't have to say that because you're a seniors company. It's making lives, it's inherent, making lives better. So they had that. Their values were really greatly articulated. They did not have any brand congruency. They were a care company that their touch points were when you went on their website. So we do this better than anyone else. That's your message, right? We've got a brand promise. This is better than anyone else. But when you went on their website, it was the same pictures that all the other websites had. So I'm confused because you're telling me you're different, but the pictures are all the same. The language wasn't involved in care. They had something called, they have a call center, which actually is a really, really big value prop for them as well. So you can schedule 24 hours a day with your mom. We can schedule because 99% of our customers are women doing the caring. Surprise, surprise. But they called those people that answered the phone the call service center. How does that sound? A bit transactional. So we looked at it and we said, it's the care service. So when you've got a really good brand Bible, it actually says the purpose It's got your internal thing that you're going to measure yourself against, the vision or the mission. How am I going to measure if I'm doing okay? That might be I'm the biggest, I'm the best, I've, made 1 million lives better. Is one of the ways Nurse Next Door measures itself. It's got your values or your virtues. It's got that. It understands your tone and character. That was a big missing component when we redid the Nurse Next Door brand. They didn't know how they were talking to each other. And so we've got this thing of what we decided was care in the end, but we've got these touch points that are transactional or don't use the language of care. So when you said, I'm going to look through the lens when I make business decisions of care, then that changes it. Now, if you're Nike, you would say, and when you use a period, you use it in, in this spacing. And when you do an email, you always use 1 1/4 line spacing. So depending on your brand, you can go all the way down. But a basic one says, what is it I do? Why do I do it? And how am I doing it? And what's the feeling when I do it? What's the feeling when I do it?
So different people swap out different things, right? Because this is about your DNA. That's why there is no one-size-fits-all brand book. So you might swap out. You may have purpose and not a positioning statement. You might have mission and positioning statement. So those are some variety of things you can articulate. I'm supporting a woman in this process right now, and her company is called Lifetree Media. It's a self-publishing and a book proposal support company. And so her positioning statement, we've clearly defined it as we turn experts into authors. Super clear what she does. As the consumer who reads it on their website or any of their collateral, you understand right away what's going to happen. But her taglines are very different. We like them, 1 to 3 words, just because they're easier to remember, they're more captivating, a little punchier. And if you're not Blo or a brand like that, they shouldn't be cheeky. But provocative or captivating or bold or clear, that's what a tagline should be. And in her case, it's collective wisdom. So her Lifetree Media is about turning experts into authors, and her focus is on self-help and experiences and expertise that could innovate or problem solve. So she's really, really focused on a couple of different areas around her authors and around her experts. So it's really important that you guys understand that there is no one-size-fits-all, that if you're cause-based, you may have defined your values as virtues instead of values. And if you're a company, they may just be values. Here's what we value. And then what that means is, how do you then act on that? How does that hold weight, right? Brand congruency. Well, then it means if you're in a staff meeting, or if you're in a one-on-one quarterly meeting with one of your team members, you're weighing their experience and their behaviors against your values. These are the things you hire and fire on. These are the things that you're able to recognize the outstanding person who needs that promotion because they hit the nail on the head every time. They live these values. When they're on the floor, they live these values. And then you might have things in a brand Bible or brand book like tone and character. And when you're describing your tone and character and those kind of words, how they shape that is they actually shape your voice, your brand voice, how you speak, how you actually articulate yourself. They might shape then. So I no longer talk in the Blo brand voice, but when I was sending an email on behalf of Blo in the early days as a brand ambassador, or brand developer, or a franchise manager, I might sign off and say, the higher the hair, the closer to God. I might sign off and say, just blow me, Dev. And so everything is a touch point. Everything is an opportunity, whether it's in an email or it's in collateral or how you pick up the phone or what's on your voicemail, is a touch point to further articulate your brand.
Yeah. So Carla, I would say, though, for sure, you need to understand why you exist, purpose, however you want to say it. You need to understand what your values are, your virtues are. You've got to say, this is how I'm going to move in the world as a company. You've got to know that. And I would say that you have to have clearly defined, call it positioning statement, call it value proposition. You have to clearly define, when Angela engages with me, what problem am I solving for her? So that's what, and then this tag, we like tags because we just don't think you're reinventing your language all the time, is they can be a bit more provocative. They don't actually have to say exactly what you do. It's more like, huh. So the collective wisdom I like because I'm like, oh, interesting. But that doesn't tell me what it is she does. The first one of we turn experts into authors is a so great example. So good. Any other questions?
With taglines, think mystery, not mastery. With taglines.
Yeah.
With positioning statements, think mastery, not mystery.
Next one down.
So I'm going to talk about shoes for a second. Has anyone heard of Charlotte Olympia? So
A
if
new lobster shoe this season.
I love it. It's actually a lobster. But she's awesome. She's if you're in retail or any brand, she's a really, really great brand to look at. She gets her touch points. When you buy a pair of shoes from Charlotte Olympia, even what's in the box is special because she knows that they're expensive shoes. So what happens is you're probably going to keep the box and the little silk case that it comes in, and there's even a Polaroid with a special little message inside about your shoes, of your shoes, so that you can stick it on the front of your box so it can stay in its little case, in its little silk on your shelf. So all those kinds of things are like magic. They're all the things that makes people go, oh, you totally get me. I'm totally going to keep coming back. So I would say look at somebody like Charlotte Olympia for what you do, because she does an awesome job of her touch points.
And so I would say further to that, that's great, thanks, Steph, is with Joanne, is see if it's relevant when you're receiving it. Like if someone's actually saying to you, I would like you to create something for me, if that's the email you received, then tell your story makes so much sense as a sign off. If someone's just engaging with you about something, then you might you can move around. You don't have to use the same one every time, but you can't choose from 20. So you could have, we usually, when we're helping somebody through a brand narrative or a brand Bible, we usually give them 2 or 3 sign-offs, or maybe up to 5, and we'll say use the appropriate one, accordingly.
So you don't get any rogue.
Yeah, no, because if you look through, if you've got a lot of employees, so some of the bigger companies that I'm thinking about is you see how your employees are signing off, you will get everything from take care to regards to nothing. And then I feel something about that. I'm like, it makes me go, oh, what's the tone of this email? So just make it pertinent to what the interaction is, but don't choose from 20 and don't do it differently every time.
So it's all about the brand, right? So if you're WAVA, if you're a rape crisis center, you want it to be very clear what it is that you do. So I would say for most services, you want to be pretty clear on what it is that you do. And if you're not a service of that nature, then you might be able to put something a lot more cheeky or casual.
So once you've got all these words down, this is why this creation of this brand document is so important, because once you've got all these words down, and I always say, I didn't do the elevator pitch with you guys yesterday, but one of the things I say, and I would even when I was going around, is in the next, when you guys were doing your elevator pitches, because that is part of your value proposition and tag is, the other group I said, write it down, follow the flow through the next couple of days when you say it, write it down and keep that flow. And then get rid of all what I call the conjunction words, the in-between words. I am. You don't have to say that. You just, once you said, Taku, a family resort with a West Coast feel. Get rid of all the we are a. There's a lot of extra words for me to have to wrap my head around. So if you watch that flow, you will all of a sudden realize, I've got a tag, I've got a value proposition. I know my purpose. What is the purpose? The purpose is to, something about the West Coast, something to do with West Coast. So I love that. But watch yourself over the next few days in the words used, and more is not better than less. Less is better. Less is better. I think we have one more question and then we go?
Sure,
Last question.
So the problem that I come up against is that we have many different types of clients, like anything from a bride to construction worker in Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
So what we struggle with is how to position ourselves. Do we try and be one solid brand that's putting the same message to all those people, or do we tailor it? Or then I feel like we're putting out, if you go to the wedding page of our website, then you get a different tone than you are when you go to the
Yeah, can I say one thing about that, and then I want Devon's opinion on this, because she's actually super creative in this way. But one of my things I always say is when we start a business, we go like this, because we're like, I'm not going to say no to anything because I actually need a little bit of money here, right? I think that one of the things as you grow is you mature into focusing in on one thing and becoming an expert at it and talking to a market. And it doesn't mean you don't do those other things. So there's a woman in the other group who's a photographer, and she said, bless you, I do babies, weddings, blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh my God. If you just said babies, but I love you as a photographer, I'm gonna ask you if you do your weddings. So my quick answer is one message, succinct. However, websites are lovely places to say you can change your, not tone, but you can change your value proposition in terms of what it means for you. So construction you're gonna do, it's, spaces to drive sales, whatever it is. Right? So, but generally, try to keep one message.
And for a really niche product, it goes to lots of different people.
Use your numbers to tell you what it is people are buying. And then drive your messaging that way, or decide to go into a different market. But that's what I would always say. Anything else on that, Deb? And then we gotta...
Just a couple of key points. I would say what I'm sure somebody's grandma said to them at some point, you can't be everything to everybody. So remember that, because it takes away from your impact, no matter what you do when you're trying to be everything or speak to everybody at one single time. You can't do that. In fact, Movember is a great brand who speaks very, very succinctly to a male audience, but they have tons of female supporters. They speak very succinctly to even an age, but many of the people who participate in Movember are of a great variety of ages. So speak to a specific audience, and I think you'll find that when you're making a real impact with that audience, other people want to participate regardless. And then the third thing is really identify and define what problem it is that you're solving. Because I think what you're going to find is that for any of those women, whether it's the, socioeconomically up woman and whatever looking for one thing, and the guy from Merritt or Timbuktu looking for another, they're probably trying to solve the same issue.
Great.
So speak to that.
So Devon's the reverse of you do one thing for a lot of people. So you don't have to talk to the variety of the market. You have to keep saying, this is the problem, this is the problem. Yeah. Is that good?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, guys.
Well, on behalf of all of us, huge thanks.
Oh, no, thank you.